There's a number that sounds almost impossible. 17,000. That's roughly the number of Filipino Americans living across the entire state of Ohio. Yet Alex Eala is walking into Cincinnati with the possibility of thousands of Filipino fans filling the stands, waving flags, making noise, and turning a major American tennis tournament into something that feels a lot closer to Manila. But here's what makes this story fascinating. Cincinnati itself has only around 2,000 Filipino residents. So how can a city with roughly 2,000 Filipino residents potentially produce a crowd large enough to overwhelm a stadium with more than 11,000 seats? The answer has almost nothing to do with population, and everything to do with Alex Eala. Just weeks ago, Eala made history by winning the biggest singles title of her career in Washington, D.C. It was her first WTA Tour-level singles championship, and the first ever won by a player from the Philippines. Now ranked a career-high number 20 in the world, Eala entered Cincinnati as the number 17 seed, the highest seeding of her career at this level. She isn't simply an underdog anymore. She's becoming a genuine international tennis star. And that changes everything. Because the support following Eala around the world is starting to look less like ordinary home country fandom and more like a traveling movement. We already saw it in Toronto. Sobeys Stadium can hold around 12,500 spectators. And when Eala played there, the stands were packed with Filipino flags and passionate supporters. At first, that crowd makes perfect sense. The Greater Toronto Area is home to more than 270,000 people of Filipino descent. That is one of the largest Filipino communities outside the Philippines. So Toronto has the population to create a huge crowd. Cincinnati doesn't. And that is exactly why Cincinnati is so interesting. If the crowd were determined only by the number of Filipinos living inside the host city, this should be impossible. But sports fandom doesn't work that way. Especially not when the athlete represents something much bigger than a city. Eala's Toronto experience proved something important. Thousands of fans showed up for her. And they showed up even though there was no guarantee she would win. In fact, she eventually lost in a round of 16 in straight sets. The scoreboard didn't go her way, but the crowd still came. And that tells us something powerful. The support isn't dependent on victory. It's about identity. It's about pride. It's about seeing one of your own stepping onto the biggest stages in the world. Now bring that back to Ohio. The state has roughly 17,000 Filipino residents. That is nearly 9 times Cincinnati's local Filipino population. Suddenly, the picture looks very different. Those fans don't have to live in Cincinnati. They can come from Columbus. They can come from Dayton. They can come from Cleveland. And they can cross state lines from Kentucky or Indiana. Some may drive for hours just to experience one match. That is the key difference between a census number and a fan base. A census tells you where people live. It doesn't tell you where they are willing to go. Think about a major concert. A singer can perform in a city where very few of their biggest fans live, yet the arena can still sell out. Why? Because fans travel. They drive 2 hours, 4 hours, sometimes even longer. They don't care that the performer isn't from their city. They care that the performer is there. That same principle is beginning to apply to Alex Eala. Cincinnati isn't necessarily her local market. It doesn't need to be. Her fans are becoming mobile. And that completely changes the meaning of that original 2,000 person number. The number wasn't wrong. It was simply measuring the wrong thing. The better question isn't, how many Filipinos live in Cincinnati? It's, how many people are willing to travel to Cincinnati because Alex Eala is playing there? That number could be dramatically larger. And there are already signs that something bigger is happening. Eala herself has spoken about her increasingly busy schedule and the growing number of commitments involving fans and media. That matters because she is experiencing the growth from inside. She isn't simply being talked about by journalists. She is seeing the demand for her time increase firsthand. Her success is creating momentum. And momentum is exactly what can turn an athlete into a cultural figure. Then came Washington, D.C. Eala won her first WTA Tour-level singles title there. And the significance went far beyond the tennis court. She became the first player from the Philippines ever to win a WTA Tour-level singles championship. The reaction in the Philippines was enormous. She was even celebrated by the country's president. Think about what that means. This wasn't just another tennis result. It became a national moment. A player competing thousands of miles away had suddenly become a source of pride for an entire country. That kind of emotional connection doesn't disappear when the tournament moves from Washington to Cincinnati. It travels. The same fans who celebrated her historic victory can follow her next tournament. They can organize trips. They can buy tickets. They can bring Filipino flags. And they can turn an unfamiliar tennis venue into something that feels surprisingly familiar. That's why the Cincinnati crowd is so important. The center court has roughly 11,600 seats. You don't need every Filipino resident in Ohio to attend. You don't even need all 17,000. You would only need a fraction of that population, combined with fans traveling from neighboring states and beyond, to create a massive atmosphere. And suddenly, what looked impossible starts looking completely realistic. This is also why comparing Eala's Cincinnati crowd to Toronto is so revealing. Toronto had the enormous Filipino population to explain its crowd. Cincinnati doesn't. Yet the same energy could appear again. That means the real story isn't simply demographics. It's the strength of the connection between Eala and her supporters. And that connection has been building for years. Remember where Eala came from. She was once ranked outside the top 600 in the world. Now she is inside the world's top 20. She has won a historic WTA title. She is entering major tournaments as a seeded player. And she is facing opponents who have competed deep into Grand Slam tournaments. Her rise has happened quickly. But perhaps the most remarkable part isn't her ranking. It's what her success represents. For Filipino tennis fans, Eala is proof that someone from their country can belong on the biggest stages in sport. Every victory becomes personal. Every milestone becomes something worth celebrating. And every tournament creates another opportunity for fans to show up. That's why the idea of a traveling Filipino fan base matters so much. It means Eala doesn't need a traditional hometown advantage. Her advantage can come from thousands of people who have decided that wherever she plays, they will try to be there. That is a completely different kind of home court. So, return to that original number, 2,000. It sounds tiny compared with an 11,000-seat stadium, but it was never the real measurement. Those 2,000 people represent only the Filipino population inside Cincinnati's city limits. The 17,000 figure represents the Filipino population across Ohio. Neither number tells us how many fans will actually walk through the stadium gates, because fans aren't confined to census boundaries. They travel, they organize, they follow. And when an athlete becomes a symbol of national pride, distance becomes a much smaller obstacle. That is the real story behind Cincinnati. The question isn't whether 2,000 people can fill an 11,000-seat stadium. They can't. The question is whether thousands of people across Ohio, neighboring states, and potentially much farther away are willing to make the journey for one player. And after what happened in Toronto and Washington, there is already plenty of evidence that they are. So when Alex Eala walks onto center court against Amanda Anisimova, pay attention to something beyond the scoreboard. Look at the stands. Listen to the crowd. Watch the Filipino flags. Because regardless of whether Eala wins or loses, the atmosphere itself will tell us something important. It will show whether her fan base has truly become bigger than geography. Maybe 17,000 will prove to be a reasonable estimate. Maybe it will turn out to be far too small. But either way, the bigger story has already begun. Alex Eala is no longer simply carrying a tennis racket onto the court. She is carrying the hopes, pride, and attention of a growing international community. And that is why Cincinnati matters. Because sometimes the most powerful home crowd isn't the one that lives closest to the stadium. It's the one that is willing to travel the farthest to be there. So, what do you think? Will Cincinnati's center court be packed with Filipino supporters? Will the crowd match the energy we saw in Toronto? Or could the real number of traveling Eala fans be much bigger than anyone expects? Make your prediction before the match. Because once the stands start filling up, we may finally discover what the number 17,000 really means. And one thing is already clear. 2,000 was never the real number. It was simply the number that was easiest to count.